Okay, in chapter 3, we're going to move further down. Okay, so far, when it comes to data, we've only looked at the scalar type. Scalar will be just one single. Now we're going to look at multiple values stored in one variable name. We used list, okay, because we needed to do loops. We created a list. We didn't really get into the properties of list. This is what we're going to do now. Okay, so we have basically 4 types of what one could call vector type data. Vector type data would be as opposed to scalar. Scalar will be just one single value. Vector will be several values, okay, like an array. Okay, so we have what is called tuple, we have list, and we have what is called dictionary, and then sets. So these are the 4 types of array type or vector type data that we have in Python. Of these, tuple is used mostly when you run models. The results of those models are saved either in tuples or in lists. Okay, so those 2 are the most common way of storing information generated from modeling. Okay, of the 2, tuple and list is what we will be using very often. Even though tuple is there right in the background, sometimes we use tuples without even realizing that we're using tuples. Okay, and then we have dictionary. Dictionary is a little bit more complicated kind of topic, okay, but it is extremely useful. And set not very much. Okay, we will use set, but there are ways in which you can get these things done with libraries instead of having to use sets ourselves. Okay, so let's start with tuples. Tuples is the collection of Python objects, collections, not just one single scalar, several of them. Okay, and each object is separated by a comma. So if you have several objects in the tuple, right, each object is separated by a comma. The entire sequence is enclosed by a left and a right parenthesis, which you don't really have to have, but if you have nested tuple, then you have to have it. If it is just a simple tuple, you don't need to have the left and the right parenthesis. Python will automatically add it for you. Okay, and the elements can be of different type. Okay, that's an important distinction or feature. It need not be all the same type. It need not all be numerical. So you can have one integer, a string, and a date, a string, and so on. It can be anything. Okay, different kinds of data types can be used. Not only that, you can have a tuple inside a tuple, nested tuple. You can have a list inside a tuple. And it is immutable. Immutable meaning it cannot be changed. You can't change. Once you define a tuple, that's it. You cannot change it. That's an exception. If you have a list inside a tuple, that list is mutable. Okay, but so that's kind of an exception. All right, so here is a very simple tuple. So you just have 3. It's not nested or anything. So I really don't have the left and the right parenthesis. Okay, it doesn't need it. Okay, so this left and the right parenthesis is automatically added by Python. Okay, so we have 3 elements. The first 2 are integers. The third one is a string. Okay. Now nested loop. Okay, so we have 2 elements here. This is the first one tuple, comma, a second tuple. Okay. Since this is a nested tuple, these 2 tuples must have the left and the right parentheses. You really don't need the left and right parentheses for the whole thing, for T2. you didn't need it, it's automatically added. Okay. So 4, 5, 6 is the first element. 6, 7, 8, Z is the second element. So there are two elements in T2. Okay. All right. Now, if you have other data types and you want to convert those other data types into a tuple, then you use the function tuple. Tuple function is you don't need tuple function if you want to create tuples like this. But if you have a list or a dictionary and you want to convert that into a tuple, then you can use the tuple function. Okay. So here we have a tuple, we have a list. So this is a list. So when you have square brackets as opposed to regular left and right parentheses, that's a tuple. If you have square brackets, that's a list. Okay. So we have a list here, 4, 0, 2, and you want to convert that into a tuple, and you use tuple function. So tuple of this list. Okay, so now that's converted into a tuple and saved in T3. And when I print T3, you see that it has left and right parentheses because it has been converted into a tuple. Now the tuple function, here's another important feature that sometimes very useful. So if you give a string, a scalar string, this is a scalar string. If you use the function tuple with the scalar string, each element of the string is converted, you strip each element and make that an element of the tuple. Then you get a tuple like this. So T is a string, I think. Yeah, okay. I don't know what happened. So T is an element, W is an element, O is an element, and then blank space character is an element, and so on. Okay. So tuple function, one way of using tuple function is to convert a data type other than a tuple into a tuple, or if you have a string, create a tuple with each character as an element,